of you who don't know me, I'm Lindsay Whitson. I'm the Community and Economic Development Program Manager with Triangle J Council of Governments, and myself and the TJ Cog team, as well as David Putnam and his team over at PTRC, Piedmont Triad Regional Council. Our two cogs thought it would be good to get together and join forces to host this webinar for our member governments and for our partners throughout our regions and the state. As we all know, EDA has recently announced multiple notice of funding opportunities that could be a good opportunity to infuse money into our regions, as well as in our state as a whole. So we have Hillary Sherman here today. She's North Carolina's EDA representative, and she'll be doing a bit of a deeper dive into some of these programs. We do have a pretty full agenda, so I'm not sure if we'll get to questions and answers at the end, but we do encourage you to ask your questions in the chat throughout, and PTRC and TJ Cog staff will be monitoring that, and we'd be happy to work with Hillary over the next few days to get those questions answered and send them back out to participants on today's call so you can have for yourself and for your teams. And as I mentioned, we are recording this, so we will also be sending out this webinar to the listserv, as well as through multiple communication methods that we have at both of our COGs. And with that, before I introduce Hillary, the only other thing I wanted to add, and David and I will be going a bit more into depth in this later in the presentation, but as the region's economic development district, we are here to also help answer questions, help with project development, help you find the right partners throughout the region and the state, but really encourage you to either reach out to myself, Lindsay Whitson again, or David Putnam with PTRC as you start to think through some of these projects that you might be applying for. And I can put both of our chats in, both of our emails in the chat as well. With that, I'll let Hillary take the lead. I think most people here probably know Hillary. She's an excellent partner and leader and is very influential in bringing dollars into our state and increasing economic activity. So I will let you go ahead and get started, Hillary.
Thanks, Lindsay. Really appreciate the opportunity to have the chance to share more details regarding EDA's ARP funds. I'm seeing many familiar faces, and I'm seeing some faces I haven't had the chance to get to know yet. So for those of you who we haven't connected previously, hopefully this is the start of a conversation. EDA is a big believer in relationships and making sure that folks understand the requirements. We don't issue the notice of funding opportunity and say good luck. We really think it's important for folks to understand what we're asking for, and that you have all the information so that you can decide how and if EDA may be part of your financing strategy to get your project accomplished. We try to be really straight shooters in terms of conveying the information, the requirements, and to be able to tell you how it's going to work post-award. Because the most important thing for us is obviously to fund projects that will be able to be successfully accomplished. So the consults that Lindsay referenced earlier are a really important part of EDA's business model. And so I just want to make sure that I say that up front. Now, I'm trying to make sure my screens are the right one. Sorry, I've got too many screens open. Okay. So for those of you who don't know EDA, I think it's important context to know EDA has a range of grant programs. And as we looked at the allocation of our American Rescue Act funds, as well as the allocation of our regular appropriations, the guiding philosophy for EDA is to make sure that we have a balance of portfolio of projects and programs that can really service the diversity of needs that communities all across the country and all across this great state need. So that means we have programs that are really oriented to providing foundational infrastructure like water and sewer, and increasingly things like conduit to help facilitate broadband. As well as things that maybe are more technology-based or more entrepreneurship-based. We also do resources for providing capital through the establishment or recapitalization of revolving loan funds. Somebody trying to cut in? No, okay, sorry. So this is kind of a really important philosophy to EDA, and it guided how we looked at the ARP. As you probably have seen, all of EDA's investment priorities are under the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program. And that program and its underlying regulations and requirements are similar throughout many of the programs, although there's some pretty distinct differences, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. As EDA looks at making investments through the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program for the American Rescue Plan funds, or any of EDA's funds, the overarching guide that we consider is our EDA investment priorities. Now, it's really important to note that any applicant who is coming forward with an ARP application for any of the 6 notice of funding opportunities that are out there, you must, at a minimum, talk about how your project advances recovery and resilience. In the ED 900, which is the actual application form, there's a question that asks, how do you align with EDA's investment priorities? And that's where you would detail how you address the recovery and resilience. Applicants are strongly encouraged to think about how their project may align with any other investment priorities and make sure that any and all investment priorities that a project will advance are included. Projects that meet more than one investment priorities can be more competitive. So that the alignment with recovery and resilience is kind of a minimum threshold. Those that are going to be supporting more of these obviously might be more competitive. I want to call your attention to 2 of these. Definitions on all of these are available on the EDA website and under investment priorities. But if you look at equity, I think it's important to note the EDA is taking a broad view of equity, and we are thinking about it really as comprehensively as we can, and thinking about geographic equity in terms of investments that will be supporting projects in areas of historic underinvestment, including persistent poverty counties or census blocks, for example, that have historic underinvestment and high poverty. We're thinking about it in terms of access of the program, of the outcomes of that program to minority populations and to women who have been adversely impacted, we know, most acutely by the coronavirus. So if the project has any connection to those goals, make sure that's included in the application. Additionally, on the environmentally sustainable development, EDA has a multi-pronged approach by which we consider this. So we can look at green processes, green products, or green functions. So if you're going to be doing a construction project, for example, is the construction going to be undertaken and constructed in an environmentally sustainable way? Are you going to be building something with LEED certification? The company, if you're building a public asset and it's going to be benefiting a company, is that company, if it's a manufacturer, for example, maybe that company is employing water saving technologies as they are making their products. So that would count as a green process. And then a green product is about products that are developed that are going to be environmentally sustainable. So that might be made with reusable, recycled materials or otherwise environmentally friendly. So make sure that that comes across in the application. I mentioned that all of EDA's funds for the American Rescue Plan are right now put in the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program. Now, so for some folks, this is a little bit confusing because we have a regular program, Economic Adjustment Assistance, and then we have the Economic Adjustment Assistance for ARP. EDA is accepting applications for regular programs, and we are also accepting applications for the ARP. What you're going to see is that the main difference between the 2 pots is the ARP funds for the Economic Adjustment Assistance Notice of Funding Opportunity has obviously a focus on recovery and resilience from the coronavirus, where our Economic Adjustment Assistance base program is focused on supporting communities that have had and suffered a sudden and severe economic dislocation, which could be both a natural or man-made event, and that they can propose a project to help respond and recover to that. The main point here is that the ARP is really a part of EDA's overall portfolio, although a very large part, and would be happy to explore needs or opportunities for EDA to align to individual activities in your community. So feel free to engage and reach out to David or Lindsay or myself. Now, as EDA looked at how we were going to allocate the $3 billion, which is what overall was provided to EDA by Congress as part of the American Rescue Plan, the overarching guide for us was to look at what are opportunities for investing in projects that are going to have an immediate impact today. They're going to help put people back to work today. What are going to be the opportunities for helping build the ecosystem or the community that will provide greater likelihood for job creation today and in the future? And then what are going to be the opportunities for us to invest in a really strategic and catalytic way to build robust opportunities for the future? So that's the guiding premise by which we approached the allocation of those funds. And as we looked at that, we thought it was really important as an agency to make sure that there's investments in communities that have had historic challenges. And so there's a $300 million commitment to provide funding to coal impacted communities. And this is going to be communities that have a direct or indirect impact from coal closures or coal reductions. This could be impacts in the supply chain, as well as direct implications from coal-fired facilities closing or reductions in coal facilities. Further, the appropriations language guiding the funding that was given to EDA directed the agency to provide 25% of the overall total to projects that will facilitate economic recovery in the travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation sectors, and really help facilitate communities that have suffered job losses and GDP losses in those sectors. So that's kind of the overarching premise, but which guided the articulation of what you see here, which is how we have allocated the $3 billion. There are 6 distinct notice of funding opportunities. So each of these rows is a separate, distinct, standalone opportunity that communities and applicants can apply for. The coal communities commitment is being allocated at this point in time out of $100 million with the Build Back Better regional challenge and the $200 million out of the economic adjustment assistance. Key takeaway at this point in time for everybody in this meeting should be, if you are working in a community, it is prudent to ask the question if there is any direct or indirect impacts from coal closures, and if so, to make sure that the narrative, the story, and the data supporting that is included as part of the application. You will not find a form to do that. You will need to create a paragraph or page or whatever length of space is sufficient to concisely and clearly talk about how the region has had adverse impacts from coal closures in the supply chain or directly. That will be uploaded in your grants.gov workspace for any of these programs as an additional attachment. I'll go through that in more detail, but you can call that document, it can be a Word document or a PDF, and you may call it coal impacts. If you do not provide that documentation, it will not be considered as part of the coal communities commitment. The $300 million is a minimum floor that the agency set, and the agency does have the ability to go higher than that. So what I'm going to do now is kind of walk through each of these opportunities in more detail. Some of these I'm going to hit the high points and go on so we can allocate time to the programs that might have greatest applicability to those on the call. If the program that I'm talking about is not the one that you're interested in, or you have more questions about programs I don't spend as much time about, please feel free to reach out on this. So the first program is the Statewide Planning, Research, and Networks program. As a country, we have $90 million allocated to this, and this is essentially structured to have two subcomponents. There's a statewide planning component where the EDA is giving $1 million and 100% federal grant to the state of North Carolina. EDA is working with the state right now to determine what that scope of work will be, but it is intended to be for general economic development planning and technical assistance activities related to the recovery of the coronavirus pandemic. Additionally, under this, EDA has allocated $31 million to support two different kind of opportunities. The first one being an evaluation component to assessing how EDA is doing and does with deployment of these American Rescue Plan funds. We're obviously very interested in ensuring that the allocation of this and any funds we give are effective, and want to learn from the work that we're doing and making sure that we're able to take those lessons and improve as we go forward. So that's the intent of that. Additionally, EDA is interested in building up communities of practice. We see tremendous opportunity to better connect common groups, whether they're being universities, whether it's regional development organizations, whether it be lending institutions, whether it's groups focused on certain challenges, to help facilitate and share what's working, what's not working, and solutions for overcoming those challenges that are identified. Both of these have rolling deadlines, and I would direct applicants to the EDA website for more information. Now, the Build Back Better Regional Challenge is the next challenge I want to spend a few minutes talking about. EDA has allocated $1 billion to this program, and this is a national program, so this is going to be a national competition. This is envisioned to be an opportunity for industries, or clusters as we call them, to be identified, and for partner organizations across the geography of that sector or of that cluster to be engaged and coordinated, and for 3 to 8 individual projects to be able to be identified that, if they were co-invested and developed concurrently, would provide dramatic opportunity for economic recovery and growth and substantial opportunity for economic development in the future. So let me kind of give you an example of how this may work, and I'm just going to throw out a hypothetical cluster. This is no way to indicate that EDA has a preference for this cluster, but this is for illustrative purposes only. Take a biopharma cluster. You might envision a project where you have an organization that is identified as the leading organization. It could be a university, it could be a county, it could be a regional development organization, it could be a Department of Commerce, it could be an organization that has the capacity to pull all those partners together. And those partners are convened and they identify the cluster as the biopharma, and they see maybe an opportunity to think about port improvements that are necessary to help get shipments of products that are made by companies in this sector to and from various markets. Maybe there's a need for an innovation hub or innovation labs at key institutions to further augment various technology training and commercialization opportunities with that. Maybe there's some community college training needs, and whether it's scoping that out or whether it's building out the actual assets that will augment the training capacity in that sector. Maybe in a surrounding community, there's a key industry or a key employer that has a dramatic opportunity for growth in that biopharma sector, but is limited or has been limited by water capability. And there's an opportunity to think about substantial improvements to that water system. Maybe there's connectivity issues needed to improve the access between the key employers and other major transportation nodes. So you can imagine that there's a cluster identified, and there's 3 to 8 individual projects that are distinct projects. These projects, as I was kind of alluding to, could be both construction or non-construction. So it could be planning, it could be building a new asset, it could be renovating or otherwise expanding an existing asset. And this challenge is essentially envisioned to be a 2-phase process. So phase 1, and the turnaround of this is fairly short. So hopefully this is something that folks are paying attention to. Phase 1 is the deadline is October 19th of this year. And we are expecting as an agency to award between 50 and 60 regions. And we will be offering technical assistance awards at 100% federal grant award, so no match required at this phase 1, for up to $500,000. That $500,000 or up to $500,000 will go to the lead applicant. And that lead applicant will be able to utilize the funding to complete preliminary engineering reports, to do environmental narratives, or to do other convening and analysis required to fully scope out those 3 to 8 projects and be able to come in then with an overarching cluster vision and a narrative and the individual projects scoped out as part of phase 2. That is due by March 15th of 2022, and EDA expects to award between 20 and 30 regions. The total value between all 3 to 8 projects that will be awarded is expected to be between $25 and $100 million. It is not expected that there's going to be a single $100 million award for one project. That is the cumulative value of all 3 to 8 projects. So you might envision one project that's $10 million, one project that's $2 million, one project that's $20 million, and the aggregate of all these together are going to be in that range. Each of those individual projects is going to need to be at an 80% federal grant rate. So again, that's going to be thinking about your individual projects. It's going to be an 80-20 grant rate. For construction projects, the most competitive positioning is going to be cash match. For non-construction projects, your most competitive position is going to be cash or in kind. It's got to be fairly valued. So for each of your projects, your 3 to 8 projects, you might have a non-construction project where you're able to have in-kind match. You might have an innovation lab or a construction project for a water or sewer facility that's going to be a cash match. So that's how that will be constructed. In terms of kind of key timeline considerations, obviously, in order to be considered under phase 1, you must have a complete application submitted as part of the phase 1 concept proposal. That phase 1 is due no later than 11:59 Eastern Time on October 19th, 2021. EDA expects to move forward very quickly to do those reviews, and we are expecting to make that initial technical assistance award of up to $500,000, 100% grant award, to the lead applicant by December 8th, 2021. The applicant will be able to use those funds, follow federal procurement to get the preliminary engineering report, environmental narratives, and other work done to be able to come back in for the phase 2 submission by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on March 15th, 2022. EDA anticipates making all awards no later than September of 22. In terms of who's eligible to apply, the big thing is it's got to be a public entity or a nonprofit entity that's working in collaboration with a unit of local government. EDA is not able to award funds to individuals or to for-profit firms. What that means is that the lead applicant, as well as the lead for each individual project, is going to need to be able to meet these eligibility requirements. Any work that would go, or any funds that would go to those applicants, are going to have to be an eligible applicant. If there is maybe a component, for example, that's going to be a supply chain analysis, and one of the applicants does not fully have that capacity, EDA can allow for procurement activities and consultant costs, but those are going to have to follow federal procurement rules. In terms of what is ineligible under the Build Back Better challenge, again, we cannot fund anything where the funds are going to go to individuals or to for-profit entities. We don't fund residential projects. We do not fund community amenities. So swimming pools, zoos, or rec centers are not going to be eligible under the Build Back Better challenge. And any kind of governmental facility, town halls, firehouses, public safety type buildings, or projects to replace lost revenue or to supplement operating budgets are not going to be competitive or eligible, nor are projects that are going to be mostly public health responses to the coronavirus. So just to make sure that everybody's really clear in terms of the matching share, phase 1, 100% grant award for that up to $500,000. Phase 2 is where the match is going to be coming into play. And that match is going to be for each of the 3 to 8 projects. So if you only have 5 projects, each of those 5 projects will have to be the 80% grant rate. If you have 8 projects, each of those are going to have to be at the 80% grant rate. And as you look at each of those individual projects, you need to make sure that the matching share is available, committed, and unencumbered. It's got to be from allowable sources. Any local ARP dollars you have from Treasury or any other federal funds you have are not usually going to be eligible sources for this or for any other EDA grant program. The funds need to be for the same scope of work, and you actually have to have them. You can't tell us you're applying, for example, to a Golden Leaf Foundation award and not have the grant award letter. We're going to need to see the grant award letter as part of the application. In terms of submitting an application for phase 1, please pay attention that there's a concept proposal required that has a maximum 5-page length. The requirements for phase 1 are outlined starting on page 17 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Any content in excess of 5 pages will not be reviewed. So please pay special attention to that. And please note that there are requirements for the font size and the margin size. So please pay attention to that as well. EDA is asking the applicants to really pay attention and to include in that what the regional assets of that cluster are, what the industry leadership capability and capacity is, what the sustainability is in aggregate and for each individual project, and what the equity statement is. So we're really interested to ensure that there's thought given to how each individual project will be connected to the community and to populations and to groups who have not historically been as connected to economic opportunity as we would like to see. Please note that there are letters of support required on this. I always get the question of how many letters of support should you provide? A good rule of thumb is to say that having fewer really compelling letters of support is always better than having 100 letters of support that all say the exact same thing that are not very clear. So make your letters of support meaningful and responsive to what that organization is supporting, how they're engaged, or why they think it's going to be beneficial. Only the lead applicant as part of phase 1 will be submitting all the federal forms. In phase 2, you'll see is that the overarching narrative has been expanded. And so we're asking for a lot more details on that. And the details are pretty well laid out in the Notice of Funding Opportunity beginning on page 20. There is more details required regarding that regional assets, industry leadership, sustainability, and equity statement as outlined in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. And updated letters of support, again, focusing on, do you have letters of support from key entities, from your key regional assets and partners? And are those letters clear and specific to what the engagement is going to be and why they support the project and what the benefit's going to be? In terms of how you find this, if you were to go to eda.gov and you look at the Build Back Better opportunity, you can get into the grants.gov page. The Notice of Funding Opportunity that I referenced is listed under the Related Documents tab. So the third tab there on the slide. And then the package is where the actual package is. Now, I want to go back here and show you one thing. EDA has unfortunately been having an increase in reports of behavior that is unfortunate, where folks are pretending to be agents of EDA. EDA does not have agents, and we do not request funds in order to apply, nor do we request personal information to submit an application. All application materials for any of our programs are going to be submitted via grants.gov. So if you or anybody in your community gets contacted, especially through social media, please be skeptical of that. Please feel free to refer those inquiries to the Office of Inspector General. We want to make sure that folks are understanding how to apply and that nobody gets taken advantage of. In terms of kind of key things to know, please keep in mind, again, this is for 3 to 8 coordinated projects for a single sector. So if you come in for 1 or 2 projects that are really compelling for the region and you don't have them tied to a sector, it's not going to be competitive under this. You need to have a sectoral or a cluster focus and kind of move out from there. If an application is submitted as part of Build Back Better, it is not able to be selected under another American Rescue Act Plan award unless EDA determines that it's unsuccessful in the Build Back Better challenge. We're trying to be thoughtful about the geographic diversity of funding under this so we can best support as many applicants and communities as possible. Please don't forget about the coal commitment and keep in mind that there is no form to do that. You will need to upload a separate document as part of your application and as additional attachments in your workspace. All awards are going to be subject to federal procurement. So that means each of the 3 to 8 awards that were under that master challenge are going to be subject to that. And EDA has property requirements that dictate that the applicant must hold the property that is improved or is constructed for its useful life and do it for economic development purposes. Generally, that's going to be defined as 20 years. So if you're building an incubator, for example, and it's held by a nonprofit, the title is held by a nonprofit, that nonprofit cannot plan to sell that in 10 years to a private firm because it's not going to comply with the property requirements. And then no work is going to be able to start prior to EDA moving forward. Travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation. EDA has set aside $750 million for this program, and it's being administered in a kind of 2-pronged approach. So we have state grants, which are non-competitive 100% awards that are based on a formula based on impacts to the travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation sector. The state of North Carolina is receiving a little bit more than $6.4 million for a 100% grant award, and we are working with the state on the allocation of those funds currently. Additionally, EDA has challenge grant opportunities. These funds are the $240 million is allocated to our 6 regional offices. There is a little bit more than $24.3 million allocated to the Atlanta regional office. Those $24.3 million cover 8 states. There is not a subset of that funding that is dictated or required to be spent on each individual state. So what that means is applicants need to be cognizant that they're going to be coming in and applying and competing against the 7 other states. Projects that are going to be impacting the travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation sectors are strongly preferred and are going to have the greatest competitive positioning. EDA will consider diversification, but that may be a better fit to other programs. Under this challenge grant opportunity, we can fund both construction and non-construction projects, but please note, EDA is not able to fund marketing or just general and local tourism promotion under the challenge grants. That is an eligible activity that the state can choose to do under the state grants, and so we are not allowed to duplicate those activities under the challenge grant. So if you're looking at just a general tourism type marketing project, it is not going to be eligible under the challenge grant for this. Starting on page 7 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity, there is a list of construction projects, including things like port improvements, water and sewer infrastructure, trail development. This is not an inclusive list. This is meant to be illustrative. Anything that EDA develops is going to have to be owned, operated, and maintained by the eligible applicant. And EDA is going to give preference to regional projects or projects that can be conveyed in a regional sense. When you look at the list of ineligible projects under the travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation, it's going to seem very similar as the list of projects we went through under the Build Back Better. The main difference is in the third bullet, you notice that zoos has been taken out because zoos are actually an eligible project under the Travel, Tourism, and Outdoor Recreation Challenge. So I want to kind of call your attention to that. Everything else is the same. Please note that EDA cannot fund casinos or gaming, and it needs to be kind of economic development focused. In terms of who is an eligible applicant, the applicant's going to have to be public, and it may not be a private individual, or it may not be a for-profit business. So same as Build Back Better. Matching share on this is going to be expected to be 80%. Now, again, keep in mind, EDA has 24, or the Atlanta Regional Office has a little bit more than $24.3 million in this program. We've got 8 states. The range in the Notice of Funding Opportunity is indicated to be between $500,000 and $10 million. Please do not call me and ask me what you should ask for, because I cannot answer that question. As you are thinking about what the right amount might be, it's important to think about what is your project, what is the regional impact of that, what is the economic return and the benefit to the travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation sector, and what does your project need to be accomplished. The larger the project, the larger the economic impact the EDA would expect to see, and the larger the region of benefit. So those are the things to keep in mind. It is not a perfect science, and EDA is going to look at what is the story, what is the impact of the project, and we're going to be looking for the applicant to tell us both in the story and with data that information. Please note that we're going to expect to fund projects at an 80% grant rate. Construction projects, most competitive positioning is going to be cash match. Non-construction projects can be cash or in kind. Again, you cannot use your local ARA funds, and the funds have to be for the same scope of work and available. Again, applications are going to have to be submitted through this via grants.gov. In order to submit via grants.gov, you must have a System for Award Management, or a SAM account, and you must be registered in grants.gov, and your organization must have a designated authorized organizational rep, or AOR. So make sure that that you have that. Many organizations only have one AOR. So please make sure, if that's the case in your organization, that you're coordinating and connecting with that individual, and that if somebody's going to be out and leave, that doesn't pose a problem for you being able to get your application in. EDA has listed in the Notice of Funding Opportunity a deadline of January 31st, 2022. For many folks, this is extremely confusing, and folks are missing the fact that EDA has said in that Notice of Funding Opportunity that we will begin reviewing applications upon receipt of complete applications. What that means functionally is I do not expect that funds will actually be available past that, given the demand that we are likely to see. I can't verify that for sure, but we will begin reviewing applications as we receive them. It is in an applicant's best interest to proceed forward with submitting a Travel, Tourism, and Outdoor Recreation Challenge grant as soon as they have a complete application, moving forward as expeditiously as possible. In terms of how application will be reviewed, this is outlined fairly clearly in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. All of these are going to be equal weights. So I would strongly encourage an applicant to fully consider and ensure that the application addresses all of these items. I will note that the ED900B, the ED900, the actual application form, does not ask questions that are a one-to-one alignment with each of these items. So what does that mean for you? It means as you are doing your application, you may need to make sure that you cross-reference and that you have fully addressed each of these items as part of your application. Or you may find that having further documentations attached becomes an opportunity to ensure that each of these items is fully addressed. If you are just at a minimum completing the minimum questions asked in the ED900, you may not fully address all of these items requested. Please note that we're going to be paying a special attention to the extent to which the applicant explains how their area has been suffered as a result of the coronavirus, and a special emphasis on job losses and gross domestic product losses, because that was in the congressional appropriations language. So make sure that that is included in your application. And then we're kind of paying attention also to the focus on the well-paying jobs and the opportunity for a project to help facilitate economic recovery. EDA defines well-paying jobs are going to be jobs that are going to be at or above county average, and ideally those jobs with benefits. EDA is not going to reimburse pre-award costs, so any expenses that you incur to develop a grant application is going to be at your own expense. There is no guarantee of grant funding. All projects are going to be subject to federal procurement and construction requirements. And anything that EDA builds or improves, again, must be held by the applicant for its useful life. You cannot convey it or sell it to a ineligible applicant within that 20-year time frame. And you can't know that you're going to do it at 20 years plus 1 day. No work is going to be able to proceed on any EDA grant until after EDA issues an award document. The same kind of thing as EDA is going to accept applications via grants.gov. The notice of funding opportunity is available through the related documents tab, and the package has a full application. Additionally, EDA has the Economic Adjustment Assistance ARP funds, which is distinct from the regular Economic Adjustment Assistance. There's $500 million set aside for this. The Atlanta Regional Office has a little bit more than $100 million. Again, please note there's 8 states total. So North Carolina is going to be competing against 7 other states for this funding. There's a $200 million set aside nationally for coal communities. For this. So that's a national commitment. That's not necessarily region specific, but we are going to be obviously very mindful at the region looking at that. The deadline in the notice of funding opportunity indicates a March 31st, 2022. EDA is going to be reviewing applications just like for travel and tourism as we receive them, as we receive complete applications. So it is going to be in an applicant's best interest to move forward and get applications completed and submitted as soon as possible to be considered under this pot of funding. I do expect EDA to receive far more applications than we have funding for, and it's going to be a very competitive pool of funding. The Economic Adjustment Assistance is our most competitive, or our most flexible pot of funds. And through this, we can fund an array of construction, non-construction, and revolving loan fund type projects. In terms of what's available, EDA is anticipating to make about 300 awards through this. That will be a range of non-construction and construction projects, ranging between $500,000 and $5 million. We do not have a defined or a predefined split of what that non-construction and construction is. We try to be open to what essentially the market is on looking at that, and we'll be evaluating projects against the evaluation criteria, which we'll talk about in just a second. So there's no pre-confined determination of how that should look. In terms of the available funds, it's going to be that $500,000 to $5 million is the expected range. Those are not hard and fast, meaning that EDA does have the ability potentially to go higher or lower, depending on the benefit and the return on investment a project would provide to the agency and to supporting economic recovery from the coronavirus. Projects with a larger ask should expect to have a larger economic benefit and a greater equity component. In terms of the length of time, non-construction projects are generally going to be in the 1 to 2 year time frame, and construction projects, anything that's going to be moving earth or renovating projects, are generally going to be in the 1 to 4 year time frame. All of these funds are going to be at an 80% grant rate, and the funds are going to have the same matching share requirements as we've already gone over for some of the other programs. Pay attention here that your local ARA direct treasury funds cannot be matched for this, again, just like it could not be for anything else, and match is going to have to be for the same scope of work. In terms of who's eligible, again, basically the only prohibition here is it cannot be an organization that's doing lobbying, and it cannot be an organization that's a for-profit or an individual. In terms of ineligible projects, again, this list is going to be very, very familiar. The only difference you'll see is that unlike the travel and tourism, zoos is back in as a prohibited project. So the Build Back Better and the Economic Adjustment Assistance pretty much have the same list of ineligible projects. The only difference is with the travel and tourism allowing the zoos. What makes a complete application? That list is detailed on page 14. When you are determining who the applicant should be, think about who owns, operates, and maintains that asset. If it's a construction project, usually the deed holder is the applicant, and it may be that whoever is going to be operating and maintaining the asset also has a co-applicant relationship to the project. If it's a non-construction project, the question is going to be who's doing the work, who's getting the money, and those are likely going to have to be who the applicants are. In terms of a complete application, again, that's listed on page 14, calling your attention to on construction projects, a preliminary engineering report and an environmental narrative are required as part of a complete application. EDA does not require consults to TIPO or SHPO or Fish and Wildlife at the application stage. If EDA invites a project forward and we start to go through due diligence, we will work with applicants to get through those pieces as well as doing public comments and other requirements. So please don't feel like you have to do all those components just to apply. But we will expect applicants to provide the environmental narrative and tell us what you know about the project at that point in time. If you are submitting an environmental narrative for a construction project, please make sure that you are using the current template. There are folks who are trying to use old versions and it has been updated, although it's a slight modification, it is a modification. So if you go to eda.gov, funding opportunities, and you scroll to the very bottom of the page, the environmental narrative is available there as a Word document to download. If you are interested in applying for an incubator or an accelerator project, please note that there are additional requirements, including things like a feasibility study for that asset, as well as kind of a market analysis and an operations and management plan and a financial pro forma for at least 3 years that EDA requires, and would welcome the chance to debrief and discuss that more with you. Indirect costs, I always get the question. So for construction projects across all the programs we talked about, EDA does not permit indirect costs on any construction project. For non-construction projects, if you have a approved indirect cost rate agreement and you submit it with your application, EDA may consider indirect cost rates. You are welcome to submit a non-construction project with a de minimis indirect cost rate, which according to 2 CFR 200 is the 10% rate. But just make sure that you're clear in your application that you are requesting the de minimis and you do not have and have not requested an indirect cost rate previously. Again, applicants are encouraged to submit applications as quickly as possible because we do expect there to be really robust demand for this. I'll note here that page 25 has the list of evaluation factors. Each of these is equally weighted, so strongly recommend applicants to pay attention to this. Please also pay attention that when you're looking at the economic adjustment assistance, the ED 900, again, the narrative form, may not be sufficient to address all these items requested as part of the evaluation. Please make sure that as you are completing that ED 900, that you crosswalk with the page 25 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity, and that you ensure that these components are included in the application. Please also note that under the list of applications, the ED 900 has specific items that are requested to be included in certain sections to be complete. So if you just pull down and download the application and you don't crosswalk with the Notice of Funding Opportunity and some of the page numbers I've referenced here, it could be that your application is considered incomplete. Under the related documents, that is where the Notice of Funding Opportunity is, and the package is where the actual package is. There are 4 different packages listed under the Economic Adjustment Assistance opportunity, and sometimes it can be a little bit confusing for folks to figure out which one to pull. The first one, the EAA-NC, is going to be for non-construction activities. The second one is going to be for any type of earth-moving activity for construction. RLF is going to obviously be for applications, and for design and engineering is the last one. If you're seeking funding just for equipment, it's generally going to be for an NC unless you're going to be bolting it down and otherwise improving or renovating the facility as part of the installation process. Under the economic adjustment assistance, key things to know, again, EDA is not uncover pre-award costs, so any costs you incur to do a preliminary engineering report, environmental narrative, or anything else is going to be at your own expense. There is no guarantee of grant funding. EDA does anticipate getting more applications and we have funds to support. All of our projects are subject to federal procurement rules and construction requirements. And again, the property is going to have to be held by the eligible applicant for at least 20 years. Keep in mind that if you're applying via grants.gov, you have to have a DUNS, a SAM number, and an AOR. And to keep in mind, the match has to be available, committed, and unencumbered at the time of application. We have an Indigenous communities application available. This is really open to federally recognized tribes. I'm in conversations right now with the Cherokee, who is the only federally recognized tribe in the state, but just for reference, that is open. And then finally, the Good Jobs Challenge. EDA has allocated $500 million towards a national challenge. So this funding is not given to the regions. This is held out of our DC office and will be national in scope. And this is for funds to support sectoral partnerships that are going to really help address populations with labor market barriers and better connecting to employment opportunities. This is essentially a three-phased program where there's system development for improving or establishing the workforce system. There's funds to design and develop the skills training curriculums and materials. And then there's funds for implementation that could include a range of wraparound services. This is envisioned to be a sequential program because we think that in order to do this well, applicants going to have to show us that they've got a system that's just strong. They've got the program design, and then they do the implementation. An applicant does not have to request funding for all the phases, but if an applicant does not request funding for one of the sections, they will have to demonstrate to EDA that they have fully addressed and have in place the criteria outlined in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. This challenge is essentially for non-construction related activities. We can include equipment purchases and training facility leases, but this is not for bricks and mortar. If you are looking for a bricks and mortar community college training building or workforce training building, please look under the Economic Adjustment Assistance ARP funds, or please look to one of EDA's regular program ARP or regular program Public Works or Economic Adjustment Assistance programs. Disbursement of funds on this is going to be really dependent upon successful completion of each phase. The deadline for this is January 26, 22, and EDA is not going to start reviewing applications for this program prior to that date. So that is a true deadline. And then once we receive those applications, the reviews will start and proceed forward. EDA is not going to be reimbursing pre-award costs under this program, so those are going to be at an applicant's own expense. And EDA is expecting the projects to last between 2 and 3 years under this award. Again, please don't forget about EDA's regular programs. We can fund a wide array of construction and technical assistance projects that can be supportive in helping to advance regional economic development activities. We have a pretty robust website with FAQs and more information on the ARP resources. And this is my email address, and I'd be happy to answer questions folks have. I'm going to go ahead and kind of click over to Piedmont Triad and let David maybe share a little bit more about how they may be able to support for parties interested in applying for this or any other EDA grant program. So David, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Hillary. I feel like that download was really comprehensive and really great. So I will keep this short because I want to be respectful of everyone's time. The Piedmont Triad Regional Council has a sub committee or agency called the Piedmont Triad Regional Development Corporation. So we're a discrete component of the Regional Council. And what we do is we really strive to promote economic development among the district, which is essentially the 12-county Piedmont Triad region. And so we're prepared to support applicants through project development phases, project application phases, and project administration phases. All that we ask is that you please get in touch with myself or my colleague, Jesse Day. He's not able to be on the call this morning. But my email is in the chat. If you want to talk further, it's also dputnam@ptrc.org. So, Lindsay, I'll hand it off to you.
David was saying with PTRC, we too at TJ-COG house our economic development district in partnership with EDA and some of the resources that we've created to date regarding EDA's ARP funding is obviously today's webinar. I've also created sort of an EDA NOFO 101. And when we provide these slides, you can click on those links. It's sort of a just very high level rundown of each of those programs that Hillary just went over. We also are providing EDA office hours where myself and Hillary will be meeting one-on-one with potential applicants. This is just for the TJ-COG region, whether you're a member government or a partner university nonprofit throughout the region. So when I send these out, you can click on that link. There are only a few spots left. And then Hillary, I think I had one more slide. But similar to what David said, that him and his team, they help with project development. We as well do that, grant writing and administration, data services, convener, sort of helping our partners connect the dots if they need an additional partner, educator, and obviously alignment with our SEDS. That's a requirement of all of the applications and all of the NOFOs that Hillary just discussed. And then where possible, obviously encouraging the thinking regionally concept to help strengthen our partnerships and leverage our funding and, hopefully make our project go a little bit further. So with that, Hillary, did you have anything else?
I think the biggest piece of advice I can give folks is this last bullet I think is so important. Think regionally. There are lots of really terrific ideas that I've been approached about. But EDA will be reviewing things and considering things really from a regional lens, so that as you think about projects, it may be a local project that may have a regional benefit, especially with the travel and tourism piece, or definitely with the Build Back Better, thinking about kind of what your geography is and talking to other partners is so important. And then the second thing is don't self-select. This is a unique time. There's a lot coming at folks regarding just the diversity of funding. But this is really an opportunity to think creatively about what communities need and what things could look like. And I would just really encourage folks to take the opportunity to do that. And I know some of these have really fast turnarounds, but this is, I know has been said before, but this is kind of really a once in a lifetime opportunity, and looking forward to supporting both TJ-COG and PTRC and the applicants in your regions as you move forward in considering these programs further and helping you move forward with the application process.
And I just wanted to add, for those that asked a question and we were unable to get to those, we'll send them to Hillary and we can send those responses to the group, as well as we will be sending out the slides. That's okay, right, Hillary? Sending out the slides and this recording. And again, both David and my email are in the chat, and I'm sure most people have Hillary's, but if you do not, it's on the slides as well. And we're happy to help in any way. So I think with that, unless David or Hillary, if you have anything else, I just appreciate everyone being here today.
Absolutely. And Lindsay, if there's a way to kind of cut and paste these questions, I can work to get them answered. And it may, obviously I have to kind of work internally to get them cleared.
Yep.
And we will get the responses back to everybody in this meeting.
Yep, I copied them. I'll send them to you.
You're awesome.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.